This is the horror film so real, the FBI investigated it. That's crazy. By Tony's Film Club. Let's learn about that.
You know, in the 80s, I was obsessed with tracking down weird videos.
What kind of weird videos?
And weird films we had seen. And one of the films that came to me was a movie called Guinea Pig. And I promptly made a copy of it, and the FBI said, "You need to hand over the original tape."
That is Chris Gore,
Is it a
and the tape he's
film?
talking about contained a copy of a Japanese horror film from 1985. Back then, as the founder of the infamous Film Thread magazine, he was always on the lookout for the most obscure movies he could possibly find. And the way to do that was to tap into the somewhat underground world of VHS tape trading.
We were trading tapes with so many people, and then the thing is they would send me their weird tapes. That's how we did all of this.
Those tapes would often contain unauthorized copies of movies from all around the world that were either...
It's interesting. When I was young, yeah, like it was already the early 2000s, but you know, I did watch a lot of recorded movies from TV or something on tape, and you know, what was interesting with like that type of recording is that you would have like this blank tape, right? And so people could record like, I think there was a limit of like 3 hours on some of them, or some of them have had like different like length limits, and so you could record like different things on it, not just like one movie. If you wanted, you could also like record a commercial or something. And I think I told the story before. Like one time I went to a friend's house, and I brought a VHS which I thought was supposed to be the Gremlins movie, and I guess it was. But basically, when we started playing it, the first part of the tape before the movie was a recording of like a lewd hotline commercial, basically. And it was very awkward because, again, I had brought that tape to like a friend's house, and you know, it was me, the friend, and the parents were like behind talking or something, and then we put it in and it starts playing like that weird, like, you know, like hotline commercial before the movie. Yeah, so that was my story about tapes. But we did used to have a lot of tapes like that, and then like in the mid 2000s, when you go to like garage sale and stuff like that, you know, people would sell like literally like cratefuls of their recorded like movies on tape that they didn't want anymore, right? Yeah, that was the thing.
They're extremely difficult to find or straight up banned in some countries. The kind of stuff you couldn't just find in your local Blockbuster. And while the majority of the movies were just strange or bizarre, one of them felt different. There was no music, no more than a basic title graphic, and not even the standard practice of opening credits. It almost felt like someone's private home video of a man observing strangers in front of a train station in Tokyo until he eventually sees a young lady and proceeds to stalk her, slowly driving his car behind her, and as soon as they get far away from the busy streets of the city, he chases her down and abducts her. The rest of the movie takes place in some creepy makeshift slot.
I mean, it does not look like, you know, it does look actually somewhat professionally set up and filmed, so I guess it makes you think, yeah, this is probably fake, right?
House. And since I cannot possibly show you what happens next, instead, I'll give you some context with, let's just say, dramatic reenactment.
Yeah, okay. So it is a snuff film.
Oh, that's nasty.
Yeah. All of that happens, and it is shown in great detail with very intricate close-ups.
When you had garbage, gotta do research.
The point is, it looked real, so much so that people weren't entirely sure if it was actually fiction or something far more sinister.
Right.
And one of those people was no other than the actor Charlie Sheen. There are a few different accounts of exactly how it happened, but what we know for a fact is that Charlie Sheen saw this movie, and because of him, the FBI got involved.
Well, what happened was they took it very seriously. I'm like, I had all these videos confiscated.
Like the FBI cares about this if this was real, which I'm gonna guess it's not, right? Like they care about something from another country like that. I mean, all right.
I had to be interviewed by the FBI about this video and where I obtained it. The guy who gave me the video got investigated, and it was weird. All I did was just make a copy of a tape and give it to Charlie Sheen.
They weren't the only ones either. Around the same time, a lawyer in Sweden had found that exact same movie and had also reported it to the police.
But I guess I get it. If they actually think it's real, right? So, even if it's in another country, you would want to stop it. Yeah, I get it. I get it. Fair enough.
And over in Britain, a man entering the country with a copy of it had gotten arrested and taken to court because of its possession. Clearly, everyone took this extremely seriously. And looking back at it now, you might think it's a little bit silly, right? I mean, supposedly it's just a movie. But the thing is that those concerns were not entirely unwarranted. In his 1971 book about Charles Manson, author Ed Sanders included an interview with a member of his cult who claimed that they had once videotaped a murder they've committed.
Yeah, again, like, snuff films are a thing, right? Like, that's not... So it's understandable. Yeah, if they think it's an actual one, you would want to try to find people and stop them to make others, right? Like, obviously, it just makes sense. I'm sure it's, a thing that there's out there, right? Definitely.
It is one of the first uses of the term snuff film, or basically a movie which shows real violence. And while no such video involving Charles Manson had ever been found, the urban legends began to spread. With consumer cameras becoming more widely available back in the 70s, people began to speculate that the possibility of someone capturing the real stuff was constantly increasing. And in 1976, after reading an article about it, a marketing-savvy film producer took advantage.
It's crazy to think like the difference and the evolution of things, right? Like, as I'm recording this reaction, right? Like, only like a week ago, there was the Instagram incident where like they changed the algorithm and suddenly everybody was flooded with like gore stuff, right? Which shows how literally like easy it is to access and hard it is to even like remove at this point. But back then, yeah, like, if someone wanted to watch something fucked up like that, they would have to track down some tapes or something. And there was the FBI after it and everything. It's kind of crazy, the difference. Yeah.
He filmed a completely new ending to an unreleased low-budget movie he had the rights to, and in order to promote it, he hired fake protesters to demonstrate against it in theaters, and even reported it to the police himself.
Okay.
As soon as they saw it, people could easily tell it wasn't real. But it did make a profit, and more importantly, it brought the idea of snuff into the mainstream. Now, that one was clearly a hoax, but many of the other films that followed continued to push the limits and blur the lines.
Right?
In 1978, a pseudo-documentary called Faces of Death had featured a bunch of different ways to die. And while the majority of those were achieved with practical effects and makeup, there were some real ones too, that the filmmakers had taken from news archives and old war footage.
Damn.
Although it got banned in a number of countries and heavily censored, it grossed over $35 million, and in some cases, it showed people real death on the big screen.
The end of the beginning, or the beginning of the end?
Morbid curiosity has always been a thing.
Decision to you.
Real gore and extreme graphic images were becoming a big debate in society, but the ethics of it were not necessarily the main concern for the authorities. For them, it was crucial to know about how that footage was obtained, because going back to Guinea Pig, the movie that Charlie Sheen had reported, it didn't just show a natural disaster or unfortunate accident, but a very premeditated and vicious crime.
Right.
Charlie was so shocked upon watching this film. He was so taken aback, he thought he had witnessed an actual murder.
By the time the FBI got involved, they quickly found out that the authorities in Japan had also investigated, because a few years after its release, it got connected to a murder case that had completely shaken the country. In the late 80s, a 27-year-old man had taken the lives of 4 young girls in Tokyo in a way that I don't even want to describe. The police had found almost 6,000 videotapes in his room, and among the many slasher and snuff films was Guinea Pig. Because of how brutal his crimes were, there was a huge public outrage, and many blamed this kind of movies for encouraging and
I mean, I guess this was going on even back then. This is before the, like, people were saying it about video game, but I guess that makes sense, yeah. Like, film and music were the first target of that kind of things. And I'm sure even like if you go back hundreds of years, probably there was probably books that were probably like some people saying the same thing. Like he read this book and this made him do that, which you know, sometimes it's definitely the case, right? Like it's someone who's already kind of mentally broken, crazy, and something inspires them. But again, you know, I'm sure we've had this debate for like decades and decades at this point. Obviously, you know, like someone who plays GTA, for example, like there's literally like millions and millions and millions of people who have played GTA, and only like, you know, a few dozens out there who've actually committed a crime upon it. You know, it's inevitable, and so it definitely wouldn't justify banning that kind of media. You know what I mean?
Inspiring him, and as a result, the movie was taken off the shelves. So with all the controversy surrounding it and multiple investigations from all around the world, the main question remains: was it snuff or fiction?
Fiction.
All this hellish, unhealthy, violent activity, our kids are seeing this and thinking it's normal.
To find the answer, we need to go back to 1985. Around that time in Japan, the straight-to-video market had experienced a rapid growth. As a result of the increased popularity of VHS tapes that people could just play directly, smaller filmmakers were able to produce low-budget movies with almost no censorship and significantly less restrictions compared to theatrical releases.
Yeah.
That allowed directors to push the boundaries a lot, and considering that horror as a genre was already huge in Japan, they certainly did. So, inspired by all this, a young producer would set on to create something that would push the envelope even further. And just like that, the Guinea Pig series was born.
Which is interesting because when you think of Japanese horror, you don't actually think of like, you think of more like existential horror or like scary stuff, not gory stuff. Like when you think of horror in the West, you think more of the slasher and stuff like that. So it is interesting that, yeah, something like this messed up was made in a more like gory way.
The first one, Devil's Experiment, he directed himself, and a text in the beginning claimed that it is a real found footage.
Okay.
There were no credits, no title, and nothing that would break the illusion. All that was shown was basically someone being tortured for 40 minutes straight, and the whole shtick about it being authentic worked. The movie did really well on the VHS rental market, so naturally, it was time for part 2, the one that Charlie Sheen had seen, Flower of Flesh and Blood. For this one, however, he got the help of the prominent manga artist Hideshi Hino. Sometimes referred to as the king of horror manga, Hideshi Hino had built a reputation for his deeply unsettling, grotesque, and
I think this is the guy that inspired Junji Ito.
borderline terrifying images. This was going to be his very first movie as a director, an entirely new creative medium to him that he wanted to bring a certain level of artistry to. He wanted to elevate it, so instead of it just being straight up gore, he incorporated a tiny bit of narrative. Something that might have gotten lost in translation, because in the very beginning, he lays out the premise that a crazy fan of his horror manga had gotten inspired from it and committed this heinous crime, and had sent him a package with photos, videos, and a letter describing it in great detail. But it was so graphic that he couldn't show it to us, so instead, what we're seeing is his own artistic interpretation. You can feel that there is a style in some of the editing, the colors, the cinematography, and even down to the over-the-top sound effects.
その後に何か見た人がだからただそれだけじゃないそれから先のね何かをこうイマジネーションしてくれれば面白いんじゃないかなと思うんですけどね。
As opposed to everyone else, Hideshi Hino had never claimed that what was shown was real, but he had done such a good job at making it look convincing that to some people, it was. A year later, the filmmakers released some behind-the-scenes footage and showed exactly how it was done. They've experimented with different techniques, materials, wire work, practical effects, and have created over 50 different body parts until they got it just right. It is genuinely a really good.
It's crazy. Like again, like a lot of people are definitely like don't mind gores in movie. I like slashers and stuff like that. So, but the kind of movie is describing, it's like literally just like a torture scene for an hour or something, which you know, like once again, like if you watch that, like in a server, yeah. If you watch that, like, what's the enjoyment, right? Like, it's, hard to really say, like, if it's literally just like a fake snuff film, and there's nothing to it, no narrative or anything. I guess you can watch it for like the awesome practical effect, but man, I'm really thinking, like, I'm really trying to like think of, like, what can really like justify enjoying that? I don't know.
Showcase of practical effects, if you're into that kind of stuff, of course. The backlash surrounding it, though, had permanent consequences. In a 2009 interview with Vice, Hideshi Hino shared that because of everything that had happened, the production of his first feature film got cancelled, and it also affected his work as an artist.
That makes
After
sense.
talking to the police, he also claimed that what they had found in the serial killer's collection was not his, but a later installment in the Guinea Pig series. In the same interview with Vice, Hideshi Hino recalls a time in which a journalist asked a film critic if this sort of video is really necessary in the world, to which he replied, no, absolutely not. And it got me thinking. As I was researching the story, I kept asking myself, what is it exactly that draws us into this kind of extreme?
Again, like, like, even if you watch the goriest slasher of all time, there's still probably a story about, like, I don't know, it's like, characters being attacked and they're trying to survive or something, so there's still something to it, but if it's literally just like a movie about someone being captured and just tortured for an hour, like, the only real thing to enjoy about it, if you enjoy it, is literally like the gore and the fucked upness of it. Like, what else is there to it? I don't know.
Or, on one hand, you have people who are very much against it because they argue that it could give us the wrong ideas, and there are some cases that support that claim. Remember Faces of Death, the pseudo-documentary that showed people dying? Well, in 1986, a 14-year-old boy killed his classmate and claimed that he got the idea for it precisely because he saw that movie. Whether that is an isolated case or a real issue, I'm not smart enough to say.
But again, like, it's not a great argument, right? Like, you could watch the tamest, shittiest, like, action movie and there's still people getting killed, even if it's like in the ungoriest way possible. And so you could say that, like, someone could be inspired by that, right? Some kid could be inspired by that. Like, you see a fun, simple, like, inoffensive action movie and he gets inspired to get a gun and shoot people. It could be the same, right? Obviously, it's to the level of extreme, but, I don't know. I mean, even though I can't fully grasp the point of like a pure gory movie like that, where like there's literally nothing else than just torture. Again, as long as it's fake, I guess whatever, right? Like, I'm not saying it shouldn't exist.
I'm sure someone will have a better answer than me.
We don't know the extent to which exposure to this kind of material results in actual violent behavior. What we do know is that exposure to this kind of material results in a more calloused person, a less sensitive person.
And on the other hand, people can argue that it's morbid curiosity.
It is.
They know it's entertainment. They know it.
It is. I mean, when I was young, like, and I first got onto the internet, of course, I had morbid curiosity. And I remember, like, going to Live Leak or going to, like, Reddit 50/50, you have a link. It can be a good thing or a bad thing. And, like, I would check out some of those gory clips and stuff like that. And, I wasn't really, like, that shocked, But then it's, like, later on, when I got older, that, like, now I can't really watch real gore clips anymore because it generally, like, makes me sick to my stomach. When I was young, it didn't really actually do too much. In a weird way, I was already kind of desensitized, but then I gained desensitization or something. I don't know. I don't think, again, I think it's really like, it's not really about like what you watch or what you play or anything. It's really like how you are as a person already. Like, again, someone playing GTA and going to do GTA in real life, it's not really like, it's not really like the game's fault, right? Like, they were like that, they had problem at home, etc., etc. Like, there's always like more correlation to it. And sure, they might say that, the game inspired them, but again, any media out there, will have like some little things that could inspire someone to do something messed up. And yet, in the grand scheme of things, 99.9999% of the time, most people don't do anything because those kind of media don't actually affect them that way, don't make them crazy or anything. I mean, when I, run over people in the street in GTA, I'm not desensitized. Like when I drive my actual car, I see someone crossing and I'm gonna run them over, like I brake. I'm not desensitized. You know what I mean?
With special effects, they get together, they have little parties, they watch these movies, they have a good time. I don't think they're really seeing the undercurrents that a lot of paranoid parents are seeing. If the world be a better place because there weren't horror films, there weren't explicit stalk and slash films, and the world would be at peace, well then burn all the negatives of every horror film ever made, if that's going to be kind of a guarantee, but it isn't.
It is us facing our own mortality, and to bring it full circle, here's a quote from Film Threat, the magazine from the beginning that sort of started this whole story, which says that it somehow makes us feel alive. We like feeling alive, and we like to feel like we're cheating death by watching movies like that.
Maybe. Again, I guess I've never watched like a pure snuff film. Maybe like the closest I've gotten is the controversial Cannibal Holocaust. But even then, like it's a movie with a plot, right? Like it's a movie I think about like people trying to film a movie with like a cannibal tribe and trying to survive. So there's still kind of a plot. I've never watched just a movie about like torturing someone or something, so I don't know. But again, like even though it does sound kind of like something I would not like to watch and I'm not into, I don't know. As long as it's a fake movie, like whatever, whatever. All I can say. Okay, very interesting. Very interesting. Japanese horror is something I've always wanted to get more into. I've only seen a few classic movies, right? Maybe it's something I could do on the channel eventually. Who knows? Okay. Okay. Good stuff. Also a very small channel, but very well presented. Not even 10k sub, and